I am absolutely fascinated by the trajectory we're unpacking today, and I'm so glad you're joining me for this. We're going to be doing a deep dive into how a once groundbreaking television show completely shifted its narrative course. You know that old saying, don't be sad if someone is gone, be sad if they lose their way? Well, that perfectly captures the journey we're looking at today. We're breaking down the structural anatomy of a decline, keeping our focus heavily on the incredible artists and actors who brought this universe to life with their raw, passionate performances. So get comfortable and let's explore how a truly revolutionary piece of media slowly lost its magic over time. Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. We'll start with number 1, the beginning, superhero revolution. 2, character stagnation and development absence. 3, sidelining heroes and repetitive events. 4, direct political messaging. 5, shock without purpose. And finally, number 6, the tax of success and consumption.
Section 1. The beginning, superhero revolution. Now we've got to rewind a bit to fully grasp the cultural zeitgeist when this series first premiered. The context of the year 2019 is absolutely vital here. This was the year of Marvel's Endgame. To put that into perspective, that was essentially the absolute peak of traditional superhero media. The market was completely saturated. Audiences everywhere truly felt like they'd seen everything the genre had to offer, right? There was this collective feeling that the traditional superhero narrative had literally nowhere left to go. And then, in that exact same year, Season 1 drops and completely disrupts the entire landscape. It totally shattered our expectations, taking every established, sanitized trope and flipping it on its head. But as time went on, moving into Seasons 2 and 3, early narrative cracks started to show. Fast forward to the present day with Season 5, and what was once a highly anticipated pop culture event has, for a lot of dedicated viewers, simply become background noise.
Early on, this wasn't just another television show. It was a totally fresh, exciting perspective. It was a brilliant, disruptive force. It effectively destroyed the old vision of superheroes and introduced this gritty, deeply cynical reality that we had never seen executed with such precision. But what really elevated the material was the cast. The artists brought this raw, undeniable passion to these roles that made you instantly attached to them. They grounded a world that was inherently repulsive in something deeply human. It made the whole shebang utterly fascinating to watch.
Section 2. Character stagnation and development absence.
Now what's really interesting here is how we start to identify the core problem, the illusion of plot movement. Let's define a major narrative hurdle, stagnation. This happens when a narrative fundamentally refuses to evolve. Over time, the writers realize the characters are popular, the actors are fan favorites, and the show is incredibly profitable. And because of that immense success, the actual stakes of the story completely disappear. You can't kill off an important character because the audience likes them too much. Everyone just starts playing it safe. The characters become trapped in place, moving in endless circles without ever actually growing or facing permanent consequences.
A perfect example of this is the main antagonist's arc. In the early seasons, Homelander was a genuinely terrifying narcissist. His actions were driven by complex, deeply layered motivations, specifically his desperate need to be loved by the public just to keep from losing his mind completely. You never truly knew what he was going to do next, and that psychological unpredictability made him the most compelling, dangerous part of the show. But in current seasons, that true menace is largely gone. He's devolved into a somewhat cartoonish parody of his former self. Despite being established as the most powerful being on Earth, he inexplicably struggles to defeat lesser-powered enemies, and his character has shifted from a complex psychological study into a predictable punchline.
We see a similar, deeply concerning stagnation with the protagonist Huey. In the early seasons, the severe trauma he experienced was handled as a serious, world-building narrative tool. It drove his decisions, his fears, and his fragile psychological state. Now, however, the show's treatment of his character has completely changed. Actually, scratch that. It's more like a fundamental shift in respect for the character. Severe situations, including actual assaults, are no longer treated with any narrative gravity. Instead, they're repeatedly used as cheap, comedic punchlines. And when you take a character's profound suffering and turn it into a running joke, you fundamentally alienate the audience. It completely strips the character of his emotional depth.
Section 3. Sidelining heroes and repetitive events.
It's not just the main protagonist and antagonist suffering from this stagnation. The supporting cast is feeling the immense weight of aimless writing as well. The sheer volume of wasted potential across these incredibly talented artists is absolutely staggering. Take Black Noir. We were given entire seasons of mystery, slowly building his deeply tragic backstory, showing us his internal struggles through these intricate animated cartoons, only for it to end in an instant, pointless death that had zero real impact on the broader story. Then there's Starlight. Once a driving, moral force of the show, she's been sidelined into petty drama, specifically an exhaustive conflict rooted in a 20-year-old bullying incident from when she was a kid. Next is Kimiko, who is given a highly contrived revenge plot involving a long-lost brother that added nothing to her core development, culminating in her suddenly speaking with a flawless American accent despite her entire backstory. And finally, Frenchie, a once vibrant and essential character now firmly stuck in aimless, repetitive storylines that just lead nowhere, season after season.
And even when they introduce brand new cast members, the narrative logic seems to completely fail. Take the new character, Sister Sage. She's billed to the audience as literally the smartest character in the entire world. Yet as you watch her arc unfold, you realize her supposedly brilliant, masterminded plans don't actually display high-level intellect. They rely almost entirely on pure luck and wild coincidences. No way, right? It's incredibly hard to invest in the narrative when the boundaries of a character's powers aren't logically defined or respected by the script.
Section 4. Direct political messaging.
So what does this all mean for the themes of the show? Looking objectively at the shifting thematic focus of the writing, we can see that while art is naturally political, the execution of that politics has changed drastically over time. The original satire of the show was broad, thoughtful, and incredibly clever. It offered a sharp critique of unchecked corporate power, the extreme monetization of heroism, and asked the terrifying question, what if a real-life Superman was actually an unhinged narcissist? It baked these messages gracefully right into the narrative itself. But if we look at the current satire, it's become a highly direct, unnuanced political allegory strictly mirroring modern left versus right politics. Instead of weaving the message carefully into the story, it feels like the message is the story, loudly shouted at the viewer at the expense of character development.
So the crucial point is that the entire work went out of its basic context. It stopped being a show about the terrifying reality of superheroes and became a much more direct conduit for political grievances. And sadly, it sacrificed the core narrative and the believability of its own universe in the process.
Section 5. Shock without purpose.
When the plot slows down, creators often have to make certain stylistic choices to cover up the fact that nothing is actually happening. This brings us to the concept of shock value. It's the reliance on increasingly extreme, explicit, or gross-out scenes to artificially manufacture audience engagement. In the early days of this show, the extreme moments actually served a distinct purpose. They shocked us into truly understanding the brutal stakes of the world these characters lived in. But now, as the actual storyline heavily stalls, these scenes are thrown in simply to be provocative. And the truth is, extreme moments very quickly lose their impact when they don't propel the story forward.
Listen to this observation, because it perfectly encapsulates the audience fatigue that eventually sets in. They are trying to be as disgusting and shocking as possible without any real target or purpose. When shock is used merely as a substitute for actual storytelling, the audience eventually stops caring. The edginess just feels incredibly forced, and the emotional resonance completely vanishes.
Section 6. The tax of success and consumption.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a much larger industry issue. We need to examine the underlying television mechanics that cause this kind of decline. First, we have the golden phase. Initial creation driven by intense passion, incredible artistry from the actors, and the very real fear of cancellation. Everyone gives it their absolute all because they have everything to prove. Then comes step 2. The show hits mass audience success. Suddenly, it's no longer a risky, bold, artistic endeavor. It becomes a highly secure, incredibly profitable product for the network. And that leads directly to step 3, the trap. Because it's a guaranteed hit, the creators are financially incentivized to endlessly milk the characters, taking a story that naturally has a simple, concise conclusion and stretching it out over multiple seasons just to keep the network revenue flowing.
3. This show has been artificially dragging its feet for 3 whole seasons. 3 seasons of characters waiting around, repeating their character arcs, and surviving impossible situations, just biding time until the network finally allows them to deliver the ending. It creates an immensely frustrating viewing experience because we, the audience, can feel the stalling tactics at play.
Which leaves us with a final, powerful question. What is left when the story is gone? When a show completely abandons its core premise, stops developing its characters, and relies purely on shock value and its own past momentum, what are we really watching? It's a crucial question for any viewer to ponder regarding the ultimate fate of these mega franchises that outlive their own narratives.
Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep critically analyzing the media you consume, and I'll catch you next time.